Ladies, gentlemen, and everyone in between, welcome to This is a Revolution, your weekly podcast for everything Rev Pro. My name is George, here as always for episode number 22 with my good friend Dave the Mark. Dave, how are we doing, friend?
Yeah, alright, thank you, mate. Alright. Enjoying a week off of work.
Yeah, half term. Yeah, that makes sense. I learned this on my lunch break today when I was walking into Tesco. And lots of annoying children were getting in my way everywhere. I'm like, why are there so many children around? And then I realised it must be half time.
Yes, mate, yeah. And do you know what? It always happens as well. Like, I'm feeling rough and under the weather as well. And it's just like you have all the adrenaline that gets you through the half term at school, and then all teachers get ill during the half term. Because it is literally just like, I can't be ill at work because nobody can come in and do my job. People can come in and teach my lessons, but they can't. It's not. It's like an absolute teacher's guilt to have any form of time off because you feel so responsible and like accountable for your kids, and like you're all on a journey together. You don't want somebody else coming in and I'm only gonna have to reteach it afterwards because I'm a control freak and they might not have taught it exactly how I want to teach it and all this.
Mm-hmm.
So so you kind of like you just keep dosing up and you just keep going work. And then, mate, honestly, first day of half term, woke up naturally at 5 to 5, no laying. Second day, woke up at 5 to 4, no laying. Third day, woke up at 2:30, no laying. And then today, I actually woke up and, like, I'm so lazy. Like, when I wake up, it's literally just like, Alexa, what time is it? And then you're like, right, okay. And she actually said it was 6:30. And I was like, oh, amazing. I actually slept. And I sat up and was like, oh, headache. Oh, no. Oh, I feel rough. Tablets, coffee. But, you know, you just keep dosing up and powering through. There's no alternative because, you know, the 3 kids are not going to amuse themselves.
It's not even like when you wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning that like New Japan will be on at that time because they're ahead rather than behind. So it's not even like you can you know what, I'm awake at 2 o'clock. I might as well just go and watch some Tag League right now.
Although I must say, I've been absolutely loving the fact that the Tag League is timed so perfectly with half term because I've been able to watch every single one and I've been able to watch them in their entirety. I haven't felt like sometimes, like when tournaments or like big tournaments are on and you're trying to fit it in around work, you have to pick and choose which matches you want to watch. Like, I mean, you know it from when you watch the G1. You can't just sit down every evening with a 3-hour show. But I've been able to watch like them all in their entirety, and there's Rev Pro fingerprints all over this Tag League, and I'm loving it. Like my kids watching it and then being like, "Is that Ruby X?" You're like, yeah. I was like, is he in Japan? Like, yeah. Then my wife comes in and was like, didn't I see those two when I came to the 229 with you? And I'm like, yep, that's Jude London and Paris de Silva. That's the Velocities. And then like Ninja Max in there, who I saw in St. Neots Priory Centre wrestling Kyle Fletcher like 2 years ago. Like then obviously like Francesco Akira, it's Clark Connors and Dan Maloney. Like it's quality. I absolutely love it.
Ninja Mac might be the most out there Rev Pro booking this side of Cheeseburger.
Oh, mate, honestly, yeah. The Cheeseburger versus Charlie Sterling match graphic was just like, that is the most random Rev Pro match that I did not see coming. But I love that because it's just like there's so much to be had for like getting to see wrestlers for the first time. Like seeing Ninja Mac versus Kyle Fletcher, I went with my mate who was training to be a wrestler at the time. And literally, he still talks about that match now as one of his favourite matches he's ever seen live because it was just so much fun. Yeah. Like, it was just fun. And, like, it's... to be able to put something on in the middle of a show with a wrestler that you've never heard of and you've never seen before, and then you're still talking about them 2 years later. Like that's a pretty cool thing, and I love that about the booking for Rev Pro. And then you see these guys, and you're like, they're literally everywhere, working all over the world.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. My week so far, mate, I've had a very different week to you by the sound of it. It's been busy at work, but also, again, this week I bought another concert ticket. I am spending money on concerts like it's going out of fashion. So, as you'll have known from like me with RevPro, when I go all in on something, I go all in on it. So like wrestling shows, it was like tickets. Yep, I'm back there with going to gigs. So I've already booked 4 gigs for next year. 3 of them all at the O2. So in the last couple of weeks, I've got Ghost today, which I'm very excited about. Are you familiar with Ghost?
Like as a concept, and I'd recognise a photo of them, but I don't know whether I heard the music.
Yeah, they're great, but the concept is why I'm really looking forward to. I've seen them twice. I saw them when they first came out in 2011, and they were on a bill where it was like supporting Trivium and In Flames. So like they were literally on their first album cycle, and then I saw them last year at Download. So I've kind of seen 2 ends of them, but I've never been to their own gig to see them. So I've been very excited about this one. And I've also booked tickets to go see Baby Metal, which again, I'm not sure if you're aware of them or the concept, but it's basically, for those who don't know, a Japanese idol band with a fucking heavy like metal band behind them. It's like, so you got like almost like J-pop vocals over metal. And people love them. People hate them. I've
they definitely
enjoyed
split opinion, didn't they? Because again, they're one of those bands where you just can't not be familiar with them if you have interest in music, and if you've got crossover with. There's so much crossover because obviously, like being a Japanese band, you get the crossover from like Japanese fans of wrestling that you interact with online and stuff. Again, someone I'm familiar with as a concept, but never heard.
Yeah, and then the final one I've got tickets for is The Offspring. So the band that got me into this kind of music, and I was like, yeah, cool, go see them. And then just in between all that, I've got Iron Maiden in Italy. And I'm just like looking at gigs, going, I want more gigs. I need to go to more gigs. Like live music was such an important part of my life that. I can't even remember why, but I think it was when I got married. I just stopped going. Not because that sounds really bad, merely because I was looking to like pay for the wedding and honeymoon and stuff. And then after that, kind of dropped off a little bit. But like I used to average, I think it was like 2.5 gigs a week. Then festivals on top of it. Yeah, like where our scene down where we are in Southampton, especially, like you had all these little pub venues where you could like pick up a ticket for like 7-8 quid. And go and see a band, and it was like decent name bands as well. Like, so that's why I've seen Fozzy as much as I have, because at the time Fozzy were a tenner, and it was like a little pub venue where you were as close as I am to the screen to you now, away from Chris Jericho. Like,
I've never been that prolifically. Like, I always felt like I went to quite a lot of gigs. For me, like going to watch wrestling has stopped me going to gigs. Simply because I can't justify being away from the family for anything more than wrestling, given how much wrestling I go to.
And also, Dave, there's like the gigs that I've just bought tickets for. I imagine you could get at least 2 season tickets for different venues at RevPro for the price I paid for 3 gigs. So there's that as well, right? Like they're 100%.
not. I bought 3 RevPro tickets today. So I got my Southampton ticket, my 229 December ticket, and my Sheffield ticket. And I think I've probably spent about 60 quid, maybe just over 60 quid for all 3. Yeah. Because like my Southampton ticket, I get change out of 20 quid for the standing ticket.
Yeah.
And then 229, I think once you paid your like booking fees is like 25, and the same for Sheffield. Yeah. So like probably sort of like 65, 68 quid once you include the fees. Yeah. So like that's less than my Nick Cave ticket. Like all of those added up is less than my Nick Cave ticket for a few weekends time, and that'll be my first gig since I went to see Jimmy Eat World in Brixton, which was basically, it was like I had the ticket pre-pandemic, and then it got rescheduled for like 2021. And then it couldn't happen in 2021 because we went back into another lockdown, and it got rescheduled again. and that's the only gig I've been to, like post pandemic. I used to go a lot when I was younger.
Yeah.
I think like 2000, and I've got a little book shop. I've got a book with a list of all the gigs I've been to, like in order, and then the set list that the band played for as many of them as I can on the same page. And I think 2004 and 2005 were like my prolific years, where I went to like a gig every month and like festivals all summer.
Yeah.
And then it was just like a few a year after that. But I think my preferred music, I've got there's not many people, if anyone, who's like left on my list where it's like I really am desperate to see them live.
Yeah.
I made all of the music that I listen to is made by grumpy old white men. Like that is literally my music to a T. So like Nick Cave, Radiohead, I like REM and bands like that. So it's they're all of an age. Let's say that they're all of an age. I think Nick Cave's 67 now, and that I'm quite happy to kind of. I'll be surprised if I go to many more gigs after the Nick Cave one. But then I'm also kind of thinking that my kids will get into gigs like in the next like 5-6 years.
Yeah.
And I'll end up having to take them to stuff. And it'll be interesting to see what they get into, because like Sophie, my eldest, is quite alternative. So she always goes against the grain. I took her to watch her first anime film in the cinema the other day, like that, and she's 10. So that's like her kind of her kind of like first kind of step into like pop culture, I suppose. So it'd be interesting. Like I wouldn't be surprised if she becomes like a little emo girl, and then maybe I'll rediscover my, because like I was like when I was in like 16, like first gig I went to in London was Slipknot.
Nice.
Slipknot, In Flames, American Head Charge, and then like Korn was like a few months later, and like Deftones, Marilyn Manson, Korn, Slipknot, System of a Down, like all those bands. Like I was a proper like new metal late 90s, early 2000s kid. Like when Linkin Park came out, and then like that kind of evolved into being like an indie boy with like Arctic Monkeys and Strokes and the White Stripes and like all those sorts of bands. And then it just sort of kind of petered out a little bit after that. I think as I grew up, there weren't bands that matched me at that stage of my life. I think so that's when I started like delving back further into the past and listening to like The Cure and the Smiths and stuff like that.
Yeah, I was very much metal for the entire time. Like when I got into rock and metal, and then I bought a copy of Rock Sound magazine and put the CD in, and the first track on the CD was the 59 Sound by the Gaslight Anthem, and quite literally that CD changed my whole music listening for probably around 10 years. Obviously, I still listen to metal and stuff like that, but I got involved in this other world of music. I was like, I've had no idea about all of this. So, Gaslight Anthem, Dave Howes, Bruce Springsteen to a degree. The one, if I had to put a list of like people that I'm gutted I didn't get to see perform, the top of that list is Tom Petty. It was someone I never understood at the time, and now as I'm getting older, I'm like,
Did you get into Bruce Springsteen through the Gaslight Anthem?
100%, and I'm still not massive into Bruce Springsteen. So it's because most people would get into the opposite way around, right?
Yeah, like I was the other way around. Loved Bruce Springsteen, always have done, and then got into Gaslight Anthem because I heard Handwritten, and I heard it on the radio and was like, "This sounds like Bruce Springsteen." And then, but like not in like a copycat like.
No, but you can hear the inspiration.
I could just hear the influence, but was also like, "This is a banging tune." And then that album, that's one of my favourite albums to listen to.
It's funny because in Gaslight Anthem circles, people will say it's the 59 Sound or Sink and Swim are the best albums. For me, it's Handwritten. Handwritten is the best album ever. And there was, I think it was National Anthem is the
Yeah,
song
beautiful
that.
song.
So I heard that played live at Brixton, and I was in the front row for that one. And honest to God, Brixton has never felt like a more intimate pub venue in its life.
Yeah.
And
My
the best gig,
venue.
yeah, the best gig that I've ever been to, kind of at that sort of level. I mean, it was a small venue, it was a place called Portsmouth Wedgwood Rooms, and it's like a really small venue. And I don't know if you've heard of it, but there was a thing called the Revival Tour. So what happened was you had 4 singers of bands went on tour with Chuck Reagan, and they had all their friends would play like fiddles and double bass, and so that was it. It was like that kind of backing band, and then they would go on, and basically what would happen for 4 hours, one would walk out after another and play a set of their songs. So there was Brian Fallon, there was Dave House, who we learned of through this gig, and it's probably become my favourite of anyone in that scene. Chuck Reagan and Dan Adriano of Alkaline Trio, and they all did their own nights. But what was also really, so they all did their own thing, but you probably are aware of the Horrible Crows CD that Brian Fallon released. So it was like a side project, probably up there as one of my favourite albums of all time. And they played some of that, and it was just amazing because like my friend who's been to loads and loads of gigs, he said like that is again one of the best gigs he's ever been to, and like it was just we went the following year when it was different artists and it was good, but nowhere near as like amazing as that one night was.
I went to a really similar one in Islington, which was the Hotel Cafe Tour, which was something organised by a Chelmsford guy called Tom McRae, who like I've loved him since the start of his career. Like he opened the festival, like the first festival I ever went to, and it was like a glorious sunny day, and this miserable Essex lad, like anti-Essex lad. I always felt like an anti-Essex lad. I'm not an Essex boy in the slightest, so I kind of lean completely alternatively against it. And this guy with a similar vibe to me just came out with his acoustic guitar and sung these really dreary, depressing songs. And I was like, yes, I like this. And I followed him ever since. And he did the Hotel Cafe Tour in Islington. He toured it all over the world. But it was like you said, where it was like 4 hours of just roll on, roll off. They all used the same equipment. And it was him and a load of like American singer-songwriters. And it was really cool because the band Aqualung had gone to see it in the audience, and he like spotted them in the crowd and were like, fancy coming up and doing a couple of songs, and they're like, fuck it, yeah, why not? Amazing. And they literally just climbed onto the stage from where we were in the crowd and just hit out a couple of songs as well. And that was just like the vibe. It was like, this isn't a gig, this is open mic night for people that love open mic nights, just on a bigger stage. And it was cool.
Mate, that's cool. You know what, David? Another universe, this podcast, This Is a Revolution, is a punk acoustic music podcast with me and you talk about, you know what, that thing that I used to be back into, I used to spend all my money, I used to go to all these wrestling shows, but now I go to the gigs. That's what I spend my money doing now. But Dave, I suppose
talking about watching like the Killers in the church and Colchester and stuff like that.
I suppose we better get on and speak some wrestling. As much as I love speaking about music, like
we probably should, mate. We probably should. Should we touch on the news today from very topical? We're recording this. I don't even know what day of the week is. Is it Tuesday?
It is Tuesday, Dave. Yeah,
it's literally how halftime works for me. So today's the day that WWE have launched or have shared that they're launching this WWE ID. So I thought, it might be a good, interesting thing to talk about. I know you've been at work today, so I took the effort of clipping their press release. It says, under the program, WWE will provide prominent independent wrestling schools with the WWE ID official designation, with the goal of providing new trainees and existing talent at these select institutions with enhanced developmental opportunities. Booker T's Reality of Wrestling in Houston, Cody Rhodes' Nightmare Factory in Atlanta, Seth Rollins' Black and Brave Academy in Davenport, Elite Pro Wrestling Training Center in Concord, and the KnockX Pro Academy in Los Angeles are the first WWE ID independent wrestling schools. Additionally, the ID will identify top independent prospects with an official WWE ID prospect designation, and support their developmental journey by providing financial opportunity and assisting with training, mentorship, and development, including access to world-class facilities, best-in-class ring training, athletic trainers, and more. It will give fans the opportunity to follow the paths of these standout prospects on the independent wrestling scene through curated behind-the-scenes content, as well as highlights and matches showcased across WWE social platforms. That's a lot of information. What do you make of that, mate?
That's a lot of information without actually out telling us a lot, really, right? So the basically, what that sounds like to me, because I read a bit of it earlier, and I saw that, I was like, oh, this is interesting. And like I said to you, I was off air, I was going to make a joke about, just ask me about this, if the Portsmouth School of Wrestling is going to be on there. And I was just going to go, no, and move on. I think there's a lot of good stuff to take out of it, but this feels very much like when WWE were going to try and do localized NXTs, weren't they?
Yeah.
And NXT Europe. I think they know that that's not going to fly anymore, right? They're smart enough, they've realised that. So what's the next best thing they can do? We'll sign up the talent, right? And AEW is probably forcing WWE's hand that bit more, right? So, and this is one of the things that WWE got a lot of shit for years ago, was hoarding talent. And AEW, you could argue, is doing the same thing as well. I know they've got Ring of Honor, but people aren't being featured prominently, right? So this is a world that we're in where they're signing up talent. It'll be interesting to see how this independent talent works alongside, because this is a bit I don't fully trust with WWE. WWE, by and large, don't like people going out and doing their own thing, right? We've seen that firsthand with Steph Rollins, right? Who she was pulled from Rev Pro. Now, is it going to be like they were going to do back in the day of, hey, if you're friends with us, you get them, right? But what's also interesting is that independent talents, but it's wrestling schools. So it's not even promotions in. So I know Reality of Wrestling has its own promotion alongside it, whereas I don't think Black and Brave do, for instance. So interesting to see how it works there.
I've got some red flags in that release for me.
Yeah, the biggest red flag I have is the best in class ring training. And look, you know what? I'm never going to shit on anyone for if this is someone's dream and take it. Like, cool. I'm like, anyone on our scene who decides I'm going to go for this and actually gets in there, I'll support the whole way. But someone like a Sapphire Reed, for instance, shows you actually, like, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of people that have transitioned from working or doing other roles or other industries into WWE, right? And for what they have to do, WWE is a very different beast, right? So WWE and Rev Pro they're the same kind of, they're both ice cream, but they're different types of flavors, right? And they're never going to be the same flavor. So people who can, like your Tiffany Strattons and Kalani Jordans, all these people are getting a lot of praise. They're going in there to learn a very specific thing. So I would say best in class.
There's like a similar program to this ID that already exists for that.
Yeah, the NIL.
Yeah, which is designed for getting people a path into WWE from other industries, from like college football.
Yeah,
and this is from what I understand, is going to be like the sister program to that, but for people that have already started in wrestling. One of the things that stands out most to me is the fans will get the opportunity to follow the paths of these standout prospects on the independent wrestling scene through curated behind-the-scenes content, as well as highlights and matches showcased across WWE social platforms. Does that not like scream of reality TV to you?
You know, I didn't even think of it like that, but yeah, it does a little bit. What I was thinking was, I remember back in the day, like when WWE had links with Progress and stuff like that. Like if certain wrestlers appeared on Progress, their matches would be blacked out.
Yep.
So are we going to do something the opposite way around here? Are we saying that if you're part of this program and you're appearing on that, that doesn't make it onto the live show feed, right? Obviously, the people in attendance can get to see it, but if I go into this program and I go and have a match with you at Progress, Dave, aside from Worlds Colliding, like, does that match then just not appear, and it appears on WWE's. Like, I don't know.
Like who owns the rights to the footage of the wrestlers that are wrestling if they've got an ID?
And I guess that's where I went. Yeah,
that needs to be answered, isn't it?
But I think what you've just said there, like, wrestlers are already really accessible, right? In a way that wrestlers have never been accessible. And what worries me about this, I've seen firsthand through Twitter, right? And I know Twitter's not real life, but to a generation coming through, Twitter is real life, okay? And we need to remember that. And it's easy for people our age to say this isn't real life, but people that when that's all they've grown up with, wrestlers are at a stage where they have to make themselves more open to people, especially independent wrestlers, because they are literally banking on people liking them, right? We can't sit here and say every wrestler that we've ever liked, we've liked because they're the best, right? There's some wrestlers that when you break it down, aren't necessarily great at what they do, but they have a way of drawing you in, right? And you could argue, like, the toss on, well, that's what wrestling is. Wrestling is making you feel, wrestling is making you care. But sometimes the way they go about it and make themselves so accessible, just send in like a reply of a story and they give a like onto something. It's like, oh, that's weird. They've seen it, right? And now, look, peeling behind the curtain a little bit, some of the stuff that we do for this, we've had some conversations with people we won't name, people are household names to a degree with people that watch this, and it's been like, wow, they've got back to me, they've messaged me, and like, I'm not a susceptible kid who might get a parasocial relationship, but even I'm like, that's cool, like, that's really cool. Mm-hmm. So you've got these ones who are then, are they with this kind of program, are they then going to be put out there more and people feel like they're connecting with them even more because they're watching these videos? I don't know. Yeah. That's what worries me, is that we are...
Do you remember, like, really randomly, but popped into my head, do you remember when Preston Vance, 10 from the Dark Order, like, first broke out in AEW? Mm-hmm. He would, like... His Twitter feed would just be constantly him talking to fans and answering fan questions and stuff like that. And I remember just kind of thinking to myself that, like, dude, this isn't going to be, like, sustainable. Like, you're not going to be able to do this forever. Like, you're going to become too popular to be able to... You're going to get too much of this. You start giving back fans, and fans just start asking for more. And I remember kind of thinking to myself, like, I hope he doesn't get shit one day for having to rein it in, because he's gonna have to. Yeah. And he kind of, like, he had, like, this reputation for just being such an approachable wrestler online. Mm-hmm. But it was like, I remember kind of looking at it from, like, you know, being middle-aged and a teacher, looking at it being like, oh, I hope this lad, like, he's a young guy. I hope he's not, like, overexposing himself. I hope he's getting good guidance from people. And I hope people don't, like, take advantage. Mm. And it's stuff like that with this that I worry that, you know, wrestlers can be put in a position where they're sold a dream and the reality is very different. But I will just say, like you alluded to before, like, whatever gets wrestlers a decent paycheck and the destiny that they want, amazing. Like, if your dream is to wrestle for WWE and this helps you get into WWE, then amazing. Yeah, if, you know, your dream is to make a full-time living off of wrestling and this helps you make a full-time living off of wrestling, like, amazing. Just, really interesting news today, and curious to see how it develops and what comes of it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, Dave, we've got a mailbox today, and it was interesting. So people might be like, "Well, you kind of came out of nowhere with this mailbag," and we did have original plans for today, which we're going to still touch on some of these through questions that we've actually got naturally. But we were like, what could we do? And we were toying with the idea of just me shooting the shit with Dave and just asking Dave some questions, and him not having any idea. Probably Dave's worst nightmare of me just put it on the spot. So I go, so Dave, tell me about this. And then Dave was like, should we just put it out there and see what response we get back? And you guys have absolutely played a blinder. For the first time ever, Dave has had to close the mailbag because we've got that many questions.
I thought we'd get a few questions bit of things to discuss, and like literally, yeah.
So thank you all.
I reckon we ended up with about 40 to 50 questions off the people,
which blows my mind. So thank you all for everyone that's contributed. We understand that some of your questions might not get read out, but listen, see if it does, and next time it comes around, throw us another question, because we will be doing this.
I'll try and make a note in my head and like on a note on my phone of just like people that ask questions, and next time we do it, if you're a repeat asker and we didn't get to answer a question the first time, I'll make sure you're top of the list next time.
Yeah, absolutely, because these do seem to be popular and they're just getting more and more popular with us. So like we said, if this is the content that you like, give us a little follow, give us a thumbs up to say you like it, all that stuff, share the videos, all of that, it all helps. But Dave, you are going to ask me the first question.
Yeah. So this is from Alf13, or I'm assuming it spells Alfie, from TikTok, who says, "Is it time now to launch a new undisputed British Women's Championship to replace the 2 belts held by every champion since Alex Windsor?" I'm assuming from that what Alfie's asking is it time to bring out a new championship belt, like rather than a new championship, but a new belt to replace the 2, and one nice big shiny belt to replace the Southside and the undisputed British Women's. What are your thoughts on that, mate?
So first of all, Dave, I don't believe it's Alfie, it's Alf13. I know that you're saying Alfie, but I do think this person knows how to say their name. So Alf13. I am fully in agreement with this. This is something, when it comes to me getting on my high horse and just discussing things with Red Pro, I don't know why, this just really irks me. It's always irked me. There's a couple of reasons for it. One, it's the only title that has this, right? Like, none of the other belts have an additional belt. I'm also going to preface this by saying I don't understand the significance anymore of the Southside belt any more than any of the other titles that have been merged, right? So this is coming from someone who I understand how this has come about to a degree, but I don't get the reason for it still existing. And I imagine there's going to be a lot of us who feel like that still, because we're just like, man, but what's the point? I'll tell you my reasons why I just don't get it. One, usually when you see the wrestlers wearing the 2 belts, right, unless they're doing when Danny Luna was posing with both of them, right, they're wearing the Rev Pro belt, and then they've usually, around the top here, got the Southside belt. Mina Shirakawa is an example of that, right? I've seen that happen a few times. If you're looking at that wrestler for the first time, the first belt that you notice is the Southside belt. Okay? So, one, that just to me is like, why are you putting the focus onto a brand that is a defunct brand, basically? So, that makes no sense to me. 2, I don't think this is the intention, right? So I get this is me entirely. It almost feels, I don't know, it just feels a bit detrimental to the women a little bit. Like, it's almost like going, hey, you've only got 1 championship in Rev Pro, so here's 2 belts to represent it, right? I don't know. Why is it the only division that has that? Like, I don't know. I
know, like the canon from Andy is that it's the wrestler's discretion.
But why?
And that every wrestler since Alex has chosen to keep both belts. But I am with you. Like, I do think that we need a wrestler now who wins that belt, and I don't think it's going to be Mina, because she has chosen to wear both belts. So whoever wins it next from her, I think it would make sense for them to make a thing of, especially if we're going to go from Mina to a heel champion, which I think is the right move. I think it would be the perfect time to do it, where that heel champion insists on having one nice, shiny, expensive new belt for themselves, instead of these 2 belts that all the lesser champions before her have carried. That's how I would do it from a storyline point of view, but I completely agree with you. I think out of 13, as we should call him, I think from the way that he posed that question, I'm assuming he thinks it's time as well. So I think that's all 3 of us in agreement, mate.
Absolutely. Just a final point to add to that. I know that Red Pro isn't made of belts, right? I know they're not cheap. But even so, I'd even be happier if the Southside belt went away and we just focused on the Rev Pro belt and then bring a new belt in. But I could see someone, especially a heel, making a big point of that, which leads me nicely onto firstly as well. Actually, before we say anything, first question from TikTok. We are down in that demographic, aren't we? We are not old men at all.
You can follow Dave the Mark on all social media platforms. / you can follow it on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Yeah. But yes, I thought time to try and embrace the younger generation. We want young people to get into wrestling, I suppose, don't we?
Absolutely.
That seems to be where the young people loiter.
Look, you can give me a follow on TikTok as well if you like. I mainly use this to go and watch band videos and music stuff and fall into the Linkin Park rabbit hole. That is what I use TikTok for. So you can follow me. You just don't expect any of our content on there. Even though Dave does tag me in it and give it to me. I'm just like, I just use this for music. But Knickknack on Twitter asks, what is next for the CTC? Now, that was actually going to be the subject of today's video. And like I said, we had a guest who unfortunately couldn't make it. So we're going to do something different with them down the line. What do you think is next, Dave?
So I think we're in like an interesting position with Cutthroat Collective because obviously Alex is currently in Mexico. Sapphire is currently in America. Nina is, the 10 belt champion who is always going to be pulled in different directions. I'm not sure how many of her 10 belts she still has, and fair play to her if she's got all 10. By the Nina Samuels calendar with all 10 belts in it. And then Lizzie and Mercedes are very much still like on Rev Pro shows at the moment. And I, to be honest, I really quite like the idea that as a stable, we don't have to see all of them every week. And, I think of like I love New Japan. New Japan is built on stables. And just because you don't see absolute, an opportunity to shout out and send thoughts and prayers to Chris Bay, but just because you don't see Chris Bay and Ace Austin on New Japan television every week doesn't take away the fact that they are members of Bullet Club. And Robbie X is out there at the moment representing Bullet Club, but he'll come home and you won't see him in Japan every week. It doesn't take away their position in the stable. So I like the idea that we will continue to see this stable whenever any of them are in Rev Pro, they're representing the CTC and they're representing the CTC's goals. I want them to continue to be an ever presence. And that can just be on rotation between them. At the moment, Mercedes has got a storyline with Millie McKenzie, and obviously Lizzie's just had a championship match. It'll be interesting to see what the fallout from that is. So as long as that continues, I'm really happy. As I've said it 100 times before, I want one of those women to be the next champion. I wanted it to be Lizzie at Global Wars, and it wasn't. So I'm now looking at what's next. Surely we're getting Danny and Mina at Uprising.
Yeah.
Does Danny win it back to end the Mina love story with Rev Pro, or does Mina take it into 2025? I think there's good arguments, storyline and business sense wise for either and both of those. But either way, I want the next long-term champion of Rev Pro, whether that is off of Mina or off of Danny after a short run after she beats Mina, whichever way it is. I want it to be somebody in the Cutthroat Collective.
Yeah.
As I said before, I don't really mind who it is. I just would prefer it not to be Alex Windsor because she doesn't need it. Because she's held that belt, she's synonymous with it. Let's get some other women to be as synonymous with the belt. I think Danny Luna is now very much synonymous with the belt after a really great run that she had. So whether it's Lizzie, whether it's Nina, whether it's Mercedes, whether it's Sapphire, I really don't mind. But that's my long-term direction for the CTC.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, I'm all here for these little stories that they're telling. You know, the fact that going into Global Wars, you had Kanji versus Azumi in like a really cool exhibition match.
Yeah.
You had Mina versus Lizzie for the title, which had been built nicely. But the best story of all of it was in, extended in Southampton with Millie and Mercedes. So
Yeah.
keep those little storyline directions going. I'll be very happy.
Yeah, I echo a lot of what you said there, actually, mate. So I want the CTC almost to be like the evil version of the Power Rangers, right? Where they are all off doing their own little things together, right? They can all go into little battles together. It's very much a group. But then when they come together, when it's needed for this big, like, whatever the threat is, right? Because what was really interesting about the way the CTC came about is they came about, like, taking over. So their first big match as a group realistically was that 5-on-5, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's not sustainable to keep doing that kind of format because the division, despite the way the division is expanding, you then got to find 5 women every time who can do that, right? Repetitive booking. That's not something Rev Pro do, right? So I'm all for the, like you said, the little side quests here and there. I like the fact that you can just interchange going, right, this week we're going to have Mercedes and Alex. Next week we might have Lizzie and Sapphire. Nina might pop up on this one, but she's going to have backup from Lizzie, right, for it, like, and do that. In terms of, so I like that. I want that. I think they are one of the best things in Rev Pro. They've obviously cooled down from where they were, right? Not in a bad way. They just cooled down because there was so much going into what they're doing, and now it's back to the cooled down a bit. We need to now bring the new stories up, and I think I'm like you. I'm really interested in this Mercedes and Millie one because I'm like, where does it actually fit in with the wider group's goals? Like, you don't see anyone else because it's not obviously a promo heavy company, so you don't see promos in the backstage going, I'm going to try and recruit Millie McKenzie and then go out and do that, right? You don't see Millie having post-show promos going, I'm doing this and kind of like wink, wink, nudge, nudge. You could only go by what's out there. And I think that's a really interesting thing Rev Pro have got. I want, like I said to you, I want more sort of like post-match or stuff that can go on social media. But for the CTC, I actually think this works because you can just have these little bits go, oh, right, this is going to play out a bit more next time and a bit more. The title is interesting because I'm just waiting to see what happens for Uprising because I think I said to you, I'm not necessarily convinced that it will 100% be Uprising purely because it's so close to Christmas. So that's where my mind is going for a lot of these international talents. Do they make the trip over? I mean, I know that they've still got 4 days, but all it takes is one bad travel day, right? And they're here for Christmas. And do they want to risk that? So I'm not sure whether or not we see something at Uprising. Do we see actually pull a Suzuki and bring Mina in for a random 229? Does it go all the way to high stakes? Which I hope it doesn't. I want Uprising. That's what I want. Because if we're going to... I said I thought Mina would retain. She did. I think we're now near the end of the Mina run. Because much like we had with GYV, it's great to have these big names from time to time as champion. But you want people that can carry the belt week in, week out. Right?
Yeah.
Because we've seen it with the tag titles. And the tag titles are not here for a while. And... the difference with CTC is I think they can carry the division without the champion here. I just think it does more for the division to have the title here. So I can see a couple of different options. I can see them going with Alex Windsor. Wouldn't be what I'd pick, but with how prolific she is at the minute, and we've seen what happened with Will when Will's gone off to Japan and had the Rev Pro belt. Are we going to see something similar with Alex? Because she does seem to be in demand quite a lot internationally at the moment. So Alex out there with the Rev Pro women's belt, right? Bring a new belt in, have her be the person that dethrones, bring a new belt in, Rev Pro front and centre, out she goes to all these places. But Lizzie is also on that climb as well, right? She is becoming more and more popular as the weeks and months go on. Lizzie Evo is becoming the name. And I'm seeing it everywhere. apparently she had an absolute banger of a match in Progress this weekend with
Yeah,
Rio.
main event with Rio, right?
Yeah, and I've not seen it, but I've heard it's great, and I'll probably go back and watch it at some point. I think that's the route to go. The woman can garner heat like few others can. You can then still continue with Mercedes on her side quests. You can have Sapphire come back and be Mini Windsor. The one that's interesting for me, and I don't know where it goes, is Nina Samuels. If she doesn't become the champ, if the CTC take the belt and Nina doesn't take the belt, that's the one that feels a bit like, I'm not sure where she goes. And that's not in a bad way. That's just that I can't see it. And hey, that's some of the fun about wrestling sometimes as well, is that
exactly.
There are sometimes you can't see, so you just want to see how it plays out. I've always been a believer in that you need shocks and surprises in wrestling, the debut of the Cutthroat Collective, but you also need things where you don't know how it's going to go whatsoever, and you're fine with that. So, yeah, a lot of waffle there for give me anything with the Cutthroat Collective. I'm going to be happy, and I think these are the things I'd like to see.
One sort of like wild card kind of answer to the question is just something that I've noticed at the last few shows is how popular Lizzie Evo is, despite the fact that she's working heel. And I wonder if at some point she turns and she becomes a face. I think that would have to be with either her. I think her turning her back on the Cutthroat Collective is a better story than her being kicked out, given that they kicked Nightshade out. But I do wonder if at some point that's something, not that they're like forced to do, because she's such a good wrestler that if she wants the crowd to book, she'll get the crowd to book. Yeah. And if the crowd start cheering her, she'll nip it in the bud if she wants to.
Yeah.
But I see a lot of merit in her being like, what her Kanji and Riho as like the faces of Rev Pro, like pun intended faces. Like could be like a cool way to go, but again, it's also not something that needs to be done right now. Like, I like the idea of these guys being in Rev Pro for a long, long time. If we can keep them, in which case, like, there's a lot of time to play out with those. So our next one, mate, comes from a lad we both know, Will Warner, down from Southampton.
Love Will.
Via Instagram. Do you think the Trios tournament will lead to Trios belts?
Will, I hope not. I hope not. That's just me, though, because I'm not a massive Trios fan. I've said this a lot. It doesn't matter what company do Trios. Generally, it's just not for me. I found. I think this is, for me, this feels like the way that makes the most sense. It's great. Like, I think having like this actual, first of all, and I could be wrong, I think it'd be much harder to do a proper Trios division in a independent. And like, I know that not Rev Pro, Ring of Honor had Trios, but even then, that was more when Ring of Honor were a pseudo independent with a TV deal. So it's much harder when you don't have the wrestlers under contract, I would imagine. So that would be the hard bit to do. By and large, Trios matches aren't for me in the most part. So that I'm just answering in the way that I would like it. But I think something like this yearly Trios tournament offers something a bit different in the calendar, right? Like this gives you the opportunity to see wrestlers and pairings that you wouldn't normally see. So, I mean, Barcelona Blacklist, right? There you go. Like, wow, okay. Them with Desire, fantastic, right? That is, if you're paying your money and you're going, I don't know what I'm going to get, and you get that, or is it Spectral Envoy, who I knew nothing about, still know nothing about, but seemed to go down massively well. Like, those are sort of things which is really cool, and maybe throughout the year they can do trios matches here and there. I just personally wouldn't want to see trios bouts because I think we've got 4 really good divisions. As we are, I mean, personally, if we're going to introduce another bout, I'd like another women's bout introduced. If we're going to go that way. But even then, do I think that's needed? I don't know. And that's probably going to be, I know we've got a question later pertaining to the Cruiserweight bout, and that's probably going to share some of the thoughts on that. What do you think about the trios tournament and belts, Dave?
So you said you hope not, and went down an answer of no because you personally don't want it. I'm going to go down the line of saying no because I don't think it's what the company will do either.
Yeah.
I think the key thing is do you need is Rev Pro screaming out for more championship belts? Not for me. 4 divisions is enough. It's always been the case as well. Andy doesn't introduce things for without a lot of careful consideration, and he also strikes me as someone like the more I listen to him talk about wrestling, and George and I have made no secret of the fact that we're both really enjoyed listening back to the podcast he did pre-pandemic, the A Squared podcast. Listening to the more he talks about wrestling from just like a general point of view rather than talking about Rev Pro specific, he's someone that really prides like continuity and history and tradition, not for the sake of it, not for not out of stubbornness, but the British Cruiserweight Championship dates back to well over a decade. It has a lineage of champions. The Women's Championship dates back almost as long as a lineage of champions. We talked earlier about the tag belts and GYV. Like, you look at the people that have held the tag titles. Like, you could make this great little video package for every one of the championships, and none more so than the British Heavyweight Championship, at the amazing people that have held what is an independent wrestling belt. I don't think that bringing in a trios championship now in 2024, I don't think it adds anything. And if anything, I was all for when AEW brought in their trios belts. I was really up for it. I was, sold on the Elite versus Death Triangle and their series of 7 matches. But very quickly, I realised that it's quite hard to have a tag title and a trios title and it not feel like one is being stale. And that's with, an enormous roster and a billionaire backer.
Yeah.
I don't see it happening. I don't want it to happen. And what I do like is, like the J Cups, this cool thing they do every year. And yes, the winner gets a title shot, but I don't really see it as the winner gets a title shot. It's like the G1. It's not about being somebody who gets a title shot, because you can in New Japan you can get a title shot by winning the G1, or you can get a title shot by walking out at the end of the show after a champion's defeated an opponent and saying, I want to go next. Like, you don't have to win this grueling gauntlet of matches.
Yeah.
But the grueling gauntlet of matches is the prize in itself, to be able to say you won the G1.
Yeah.
The British J Cup's got that. You look at who's won the J Cup, and you look at Leo Rush, Leon Slater, Robbie X, Michael Oku, Jushin Thunder Liger, El Phantasmo, Speedball Mike Bailey. That's a list. And if they can do that with the trios championships, they need to have a good strong start with someone who can win it, whose name can be a bit synonymous with it, and then you build from there. And if they can do that, then that's kind of, it's got all of the pomp and majesty needed. I don't think you need belts for it. You just need that beautiful shot of them holding up a trophy.
Yeah, and I do hope as well, at the end of the tournament, that I go, actually, Rev Pro and the way they do trios, much like I said before, I'm not huge on multi-man matches, but I like the Revolution tag matches, right? So they may well do something that I go, I like this. But the one thing that I will add, where I think Rev Pro would excel in this area, just to play devil's advocate on my own point, is I've always said the reason I'm not as keen on trios is because there's not much story generally applied to these kind of things. They're more about banger matches and that's great. We need that in independent wrestling. But Rev Pro are also, for me, the capital of banger matches. Do you need a trios division to do that? I don't know, but it's a good one to talk about. And speaking of trios, Shabrother on Twitter said, one safe and one bold prediction for teams in the trios tournament. So, Dave, what are you thinking?
Yeah, so I've written a list. I've written 2 lists for this. I wrote a list when the trios tournament was announced, and then I've done a reflection of the list now that we've had 3 or 4 teams announced. So I'm going to go with one from that list where it's still a bit of a bold choice, and I really want it to happen. It's reasonable, it's possible, but it's not likely. And then a team that I think is a little bit out there that actually makes a lot of storyline sense. So the one that I really want and is a bit out there because they've not been seen in Rev Pro for a long time is Kings of the North, OTT. So Damien Corvin, Bonesaw, and Duncan Disorderly. Like, I've never seen them live. I've seen them in OTT. Like, I really enjoy their work. I feel like as a credible trio, and you're not talking about flying somebody in from Japan or Mexico with like really expensive costs associated. You're talking about like, you know, a British team. There's not many British trios out there that have got the history that these guys have got. Like, Bonesaw and Corvin have been in OTT for the full 10 years that company's been in existence. They're like synonymous with it. I feel like they'd add a real pedigree to it. And then the trio that I'm picking that is a bit more of a safe bet, even though they've never tagged together before. Shah Samuels with Josh James and Jordan Said.
Yeah.
I really like the idea of extending the Shah and Josh James storyline. Josh James is desperate for Shah to accept him, and Shah's been a bit hesitant so far. So I quite like the idea of the former contender who busted his arse off to get out of the contenders division and be accepted on the, you know, on the full roster of Rev Pro, being in a team where Shah's actually picked the third man, and he's picked a new contender who he actually likes more than he likes Josh James in Jordan Said. Like, Jordan and Shah in canon are like work really well together because I always think of like the London School of Wrestling and the Portsmouth School of Wrestling as being Rev Pro canon. It's within storyline that Shah is the head trainer at the London School of Wrestling, and it's also in story that Jordan Said attends the London School of Wrestling. Then, if they want to lean on it, they can. The fact that that they've tagged together outside of Rev Pro, so you can lean into that if you want to. And I quite like the idea that Shah could pick anybody to tag with, and instead of picking Josh James, someone like I say who's worked to get out of the contenders division, he picked the lad who replaced him in the contenders division by picking Jordan Said, and you can have a bit of friction between Josh and Jordan. I feel like there's quite a lot of storyline that can be played on in that trio, and I feel like that's what we're going to get. I think as of right now, we've got four announced and 4 to go.
Yeah.
Obviously, this is going to go out on Friday, so maybe by Friday we've had more teams announced. I don't know. But I feel like we're going to get more teams that are made up to extend current Rev Pro storylines than we are going to get imported teams who are there to, you know, bring a bit of star power to the event. I think that some of the singles matches that occur on the events are going to have some of that high stakes, and that the tournament itself is going to extend some nice storylines along the way.
Yeah, I would agree. I love the ones. Well, I'm going to pick a team that's both, I think, could be a bit of a safe bet in some ways, but also be a bit out there in another way. It's a trio we've seen, which is why I'm going for a safe bet. But do I think it would happen? I don't know. And that's Mills, Jay Joshua, and Gabe Kidd.
Yeah.
I wondered whether or not we might see one of those trios from that match in the trios tournament. And then when the trios that started getting announced, I was like, well, Tanahashi is not going to be in that tournament, surely. But this is one for me that...
Tanahashi in the HMV Empire in Coventry.
Yeah. I mean, Doncaster and Coventry, spoiling the man. But no, it was one for me that, like, Gabe Kidd feels like this one he's interested in that he's a guy that he's a big deal, right?
Mm-hmm.
Big deal in New Japan. He's had a match with Eddie Kingston and stuff like that. Like, the guy's a big deal. And then he turns up to battle Josh James in Southampton. He wasn't even advertised, if I recall correctly, for that, because I know we were at the venue and we were like, oh, interesting. Like, when he turned up. So he feels a little bit like, almost like an Ospreay in that, where he's a big deal, but he'll just turn up to these small shows. I'm not saying that this is a small show, but it's one where I go, is this too small or is this just too random for him? No, I don't think it is. I think he's a name that can shift. Where
it's like, with people like Gabe, you're not just talking about flying him over for a Rev Pro show, because if you fly him over for the weekend, he can go and see his family, he can go and see his mates. He can, like, do you know what I mean? And it's not like when we interviewed Manders, and Manders was in an Airbnb for a week.
Mm-hmm.
Like, in between his progress booking and his Rev Pro booking.
Yeah.
And he's literally just killing time. It's not like that. Like Gabe can literally come home and see family and stuff. So that's very plausible. I looked at the New Japan schedule when I wrote my list, because I was contemplating putting him on. The tag league that he will be in starts a few days later, so that's fine.
Yeah.
Like, he won't be working a show as part of the tag league yet. There's the Stardom and New Japan crossover show on that day, so it would just be a case of if he's working that show or not.
Yeah.
But with the nature of that show being a crossover, you're not going to get everybody on the card.
Yeah.
So you could absolutely still have a War Dogs match without Gabe.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's very much, it's an optimistic shout, but it also, I can see why it's a bold prediction, but it's also very much like we've just seen this trio.
Mm-hmm.
And it isn't that the point sometimes of putting a trio together for a random match to be like, now you've seen them together, you're not going to be surprised when you see them together.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah. Nice. So what we got next then, Dave? What's the next question up on the board?
So it's from Joe Bagshaw on Instagram, who asked, if Gideon relaunched the Legion from current Rev Pro wrestlers, who would benefit from it? So I kind of looked at this as like, who would benefit from working with Gideon?
Okay,
and being under his wing.
Yeah.
Gideon's obviously an amazing talker who would benefit from that that side of it, him being like a mouthpiece for him, and who I suppose fits in with the Legion. I've got my answer. The minute I saw this question, I was like, well, that's obvious. I'm curious to see if we say the same thing.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to. So kind of like my experience of the Legion, kind of like, because I was intrigued by this question, because I was like, is there something specific other than working alongside Gideon, right? But I almost get this like battle-tested unit sort of like this feeling, like the people that I've seen, like obviously Suji is the one that stood out most as being a little bit different, but Lucy Phillips was one of the ones that I saw. And I've seen a few different people in it. I am going with someone
loads of people, mate. It's had loads of people if you go back, because it's had like Haskins, Chris Ridgway, Charles Samuels, Rampage Brown.
What it feels like to me is very much a stable where it is like everyone who's been in it. It's not so much like an entertainment kind of set. It's a battle kind of almost.
Yeah, it's almost like an anti-entertainment group. Like,
yeah. So I'll tell you, right. So I've got 3 people that jumped out to me.
Me too.
Okay, I'm interested. We might cross over on one. First of all, one of my people is someone who has actually been in the Legion, and she doesn't get featured much anymore. And that's Sky Smith.
I know who you're going to say, and I love that you're going to give her a shout out. Yeah, I love the woman.
Yeah, Sky Smithson, I think, is the most underrated British women's wrestler. You know what, like, for a long time, I watched Sky when I was in Rev Pro, and I thought Sky was great, but I took Sky for granted. And then there was another show that I saw Sky on, I think it was Monday Night Wrestling, and I was just, there's something different from, like, and you all have seen this from when you were in the 1865 and you were stood, right? And I was saying, and there's something a bit different. And I think it was her versus Chantal Jordan is the match I saw, actually. I think that was the match. And yeah, it was great. And I was just like, I want to see more of her. And especially as we're extending this women's division, I don't understand. I just don't understand why she's not been featured. I just generally don't. And I know that people cycle around different promotions and whatnot. So that might be part of it. But I just think now is a good time. Like, we're this women's division is obviously, we're featuring more and more prominent. She is someone that the likes of your Lucia Lees and that who are coming up through the ranks, they will benefit huge. And I know they'll be wrestling in other places, but Sapphire and Lucia getting to wrestle someone like Sky Smithson on the regular in Rev Pro would be great. My next one is another woman, and you'll see the link here straight away, and it's LA Taylor.
Mm-hmm.
Right? She is someone that is very different, but to me, when I think of the Legion, I think of these big burly guys. Why can't it be a big burly woman? Right? And so that's your focal point, is you've got, there's your, like, you've got in other promotions, you've got like your Shah Samuels, your Bullet, people like that. LA Taylor. You've got the link in there with Sky Smithson. So that gives you your, almost like, you're not going to have your friction within the group, right? Because they are a unit in themselves. Sky and Gideon have that relationship as well from being in the Legion. So that feels good to me. So that would, I think, and that's an interesting dynamic that is a little bit different. It's not going to be the same as Cutthroat Collective, because it's not going to be an all-female group either. Because my third person in that group, and I could potentially extend it to having an additional tag team in there, my third person would be Will Caven.
Interesting.
He, for me, feels like he can fit that kind of style group, because as much, like you say, at times he's like the slimy, almost like that kind of no fucks given kind of guy. I could imagine him like having the vicious side in that kind of group.
100%. Yeah.
So those are my three picks. How about you?
I had Caven, and then I had True and Lacey with them. And
True and Lacey was who, when I just said, because when my initial thought was I could go with those three, and I was like, yeah, that would work. So when I said extend a tag team, that was who I was thinking of there.
Mate, put our two teams together. Caven, True and Lacey, LA Taylor and Sky Smithson with Gideon giving it all that. But I'd love that.
Book it, Quilden.
Gideon and Caven have got some history.
Yeah.
At the show in Birmingham that ran last year, Lucian Phillips didn't make it on the day, and Gideon called in a favour from Will Caven. Mm-hmm. He always puts Will Caven over on commentary. And when I did my interview with Will Caven, I'd say a few weeks ago, but it might be more than that now. It was just after he won the title, so it must have been end of August, early September. He put over how much respect and love he's got for Gideon. So like that all fits in perfectly.
Yeah.
True and Lacey are the perfect smug, like cocky little shit heels, aren't they?
They so are.
Run around doing Caven's bidding. I'm loving that. I want to see it extended. They've got to be in the trios tournament. I feel like that. I wouldn't be surprised if by the time we finish recording this, that's been announced, or if by the time this comes out on Friday, that's been announced, because it just feels like a no-brainer. I really like that. Joe Bagshaw, thank you for bringing the idea of the Legion reforming back to the forefront of discussion, because I absolutely want to see what we've just pitched.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that would be great. Very different question now, Dave. Favourite Rev Pro venue?
Oh, this is the
this is from R1 Lee. Yeah, R1 Lee. Yeah.
This was another TikTok question, right?
It is another TikTok question, Dave. You're right.
Favourite Rev Pro venue? So I've got like a really obvious answer, which is your call, because It's the first place I saw Rev Pro. It feels like home. It feels like the home of Rev Pro. So that's like the answer that I think everyone would be a bit disappointed to hear because it's the expected answer. But it is the truth. If I was going to go for like on the circuit, for want of a better phrase, venue, it's hard because I genuinely love all of the venues for different reasons, and I look at things for all sorts of like silly things that other people might not think about. Because when I'm at a show, I'm also taking photos for my content.
Mm-hmm.
I like certain venues for how good the lighting is in there and how easy it is to capture good photos. Like my favourite venue to take photos in is Sheffield Network.
Mm-hmm.
My favourite venue in... Do you know what? There's a really, really good argument for Sheffield Network being my favourite venue. I like so much about it. I love the fact that the good people of Sheffield don't believe in queuing up for hours before a show. So you can literally turn up half an hour before the doors open and sit yourself in the front row because people are just staying at home until a reasonable hour and then they turn up after the doors are open. I love that. But I love the venue. I love the crowd. I love the atmosphere that's in there. Obviously, like I love the 1865 down in Southampton because I've like made loads of friends there and I've met loads of people there. Like we would have probably, I'm sure we would have met at some point, but it wouldn't have happened as early as it did if it weren't for the 1865. The same as Spike as well. And then like there's something about going back to the 229 every month because it's every month. It feels like it's kind of this just part of the routine, and St Neots and Stevenage are just down the road for me. So it's like there, and Coventry, to be fair, will become like that because Coventry and Stevenage are equal distance for me. It's just Stevenage is south and Coventry is north.
Yeah.
But I think right now, if I was going to pick one outside of your call, I'd pick the Sheffield Network.
Yeah, nice. I like that. For me, look, I'm not going to go with what some might seem to be the expected answer for me, and I'm not going to say the Doncaster Dome, despite the fact that RevPro has went to the Doncaster Dome. Much like you, I've got different things for different reasons. If I'm talking favourite bigger venue, and what I mean by bigger venue is one that has put on a show, kind of like a pay-per-view, if you will. Controversially, Crystal Palace. I really like Crystal Palace. Part of that is because I don't have to then hit central London on the train. I can get off at Clapham Junction and change from there. I know most people are coming the other way and talk about nightmare travel. I love it, right? It's a nice little travel up for me. I can get the train afterwards. Perfect. But the venue itself, I just like the venue. I think it's a nice size venue. I like for what is essentially a sports hall, right? The actual architecture and the beams and stuff like that. I'm a nerd for architecture, right? I just love how it looks. And I love like when you're in there, how it's daylight. And you can see it go from daylight to night. And as someone that always, as a kid, I love WWE stadium shows. Because it starts off light. They're wrestling in the light. And then it goes dark. And you kind of get a bit of that there as well. It's got a nice area up the top for like merch and stuff like that. So I really love that. So that's my favourite bigger venue. Even though I've got a lot of love after the last 2 times of Stevenage as well. Favourite regional, by far, 1865. It is just everything I love in a venue. The only thing that I wished it had different, and if I could pick up the atmosphere of the 1865, I would put it in Portsmouth Guildhall. Because Portsmouth Guildhall is this lovely venue and it has the longest merchandise table you've ever seen, and it was so easy to go and get your meet and greets done and all of that. Whereas that's the one thing I don't like about Southampton, it's very cramped around there, plus the light for photos is shit.
Oh god, yeah. You can't get an entrance photo on in the 1865. You can't get a merch table photo.
Well, you know what I've started doing? I've started changing, so rather than doing a photo, change it to video. And I just screen grab the videos after that now. Yeah, that's what I do. As like I said, the quality of the light, especially for like photos, is rubbish when you're like trying to do a selfie or something. So yeah.
Yeah, nice one, mate.
Nice. So, Dave, very similar theme, and this is one I imagine with the amount of venues you've been to that we're probably gonna have to speed run this one a little bit.
I've written the list.
From Ghostly Billy from Instagram, favorite match from each venue you've seen Rev Pro in.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I had to make a list. So I had to think about all the different venues. So unless I'm missing one, I think I've seen Rev Pro in 11 different venues. So I've picked a match and an honourable mention for each venue, but I won't elaborate. I'll just bounce through.
Oh, nice. Love that.
So Doncaster Dome, my honourable mention was Ishii versus Jacobs, 3. But my favourite match from the Doncaster Dome was Michael Oku versus RKJ.
Nice.
From the Mill in Birmingham, the honourable mention was Gabe Kidd versus Michael Oku, but my favourite match was Will Ospreay versus Luke Jacobs.
Mm-hmm.
From the HMV Empire in Coventry, my honourable mention was Kanji versus Debbie Keitel, but my favourite match was Manlight DeReese versus Michael Oku. From Crystal Palace, my honourable mention was Connor Mills versus Zack Sabre Jr., but the one which no one's going to be surprised at was Oku versus Ospreay 3. York Hall, my honourable mention was Speedball Mike Bailey versus Leon Slater. And the one was Oku versus Ospreay 2.
Mm-hmm.
For the Copper Box, honourable mention for Oku and Jacobs as the main event of this year's Copper Box, but the one had to be Ishii versus Jacobs 1. And then you get to some of the venues I've been to the most. The 229, honourable mention was Zaya versus Leon Slater from earlier this year, which we get the rematch of this week, which I cannot wait for. But the one was this time last year, Oku versus Jacobs. Half an hour semi-main event. For St. Neots, 2 women's matches, which I was really surprised at because, like, when you think of the fact that on an average card, there's normally 6 matches, 7 matches that involve men and 1 or 2 that involve women's. But the honourable mention was Nina Samuels versus Kanji earlier this year, and my favourite St. Neots match was Danny Luna challenging Alex Windsor for the Undisputed British Women's Championship last year.
Oh, nice.
Stevenage has got a couple of cool ones as well. So my honourable mention is from the J Cup this year, Lycos versus Lycos 2.
Oh, yes.
Which I think I'm gonna adore that match forever. And then my favourite Stevenage match was Kushida versus Robbie X. So you get a real flavour for my tastes in wrestling by me choosing those 2 matches.
Absolutely, you do.
And then Sheffield, Pac versus Shota Umino was my honourable mention. And my favourite was RKJ versus Mike DeVecchio.
Nice.
And then finally, Southampton, honourable mention, Robbie X versus Igor Blom from Easter Monday this year.
Yeah.
And my favourite, Charles Samuels versus David Francisco in the Respect match.
Nice. I did wonder whether Igor Blanc and Robbie X would feature on yours because I think that would have to be my honourable mention.
I love that match so much.
Yeah, I'm just actually, because as I was going through, I realised there was one. Actually, no, I do know the match from it, but there was one show I was like, oh my god, I forgot that I'd seen Rev Pro in this venue as well. So I was just pulling up the card in front of me. So Rev Pro. So I'm going to start with kind of the order of venues I've been to. So from Southampton Guildhall, that was my first ever Rev Pro show. My favourite match on there was Will Ospreay versus Ricochet.
Shock.
Yeah, shock. 2015. Sorry. Also had John Morrison and Mark Haskins and Josh Bowden defeating Tommaso Ciampa, who at the time people were like, who?
No,
then we're going to go to Reading Leisure Centre, where my favourite match on that card was AJ Styles versus Jushin Thunder Liger for the British Heavyweight title. That was the reason I went to that show. And again, honourable mention goes to Kazuchika Okada versus Will Ospreay. Then after that, I would have gone to Southampton 1865. Easy one for me there. Will Ospreay versus Michael Oku, the first in the trilogy. Fantastic match. Then Portsmouth Guildhall. This is the one that I've found it hard to pick a match from. Purely because Portsmouth is always a really weird show in that regard. But the one that, looking at my spreadsheet, that I'm settling on for that, and it's 2 matches, which I'm going with one because it was all one story. It was a show story that ended up having Maya Matthews versus Alex Windsor, but getting there because of a match with Sapphire Reed, which so I really enjoyed that. Not a lot of standouts from Portsmouth though, but that was really fun. Then we're going to, so I've been to there. Stevenage, I would say that's an interesting one. To be fair, I'm going to go with that. You know, that Lycos 2 one.
Yeah,
It's going to go a bit rogue. I mean, I love Manders versus Luke as well. But again, recency bias for Stevenage. But yeah, really like those. Then we're Doncaster Dome. I'm just going to go the opposite way around for yours. And I'm just going to balance it. Luke and Ishii main event. Then going to London. So 229. I think it's got to be Zazaya versus Leon. Right, nothing beat that on the night. And I've only been to 1229 show. Then we've got Copper Box. So Copper Box, I would say Luke versus Ishii there. Crystal Palace, Oku Ospreay. And York Hall. What was my favourite on that York Hall show? Oh God, I'm struggling with that card. I can't remember.
My favourite was Robbie X versus Dijak.
Yeah, you know what? To be fair, I think that might be the one that I was probably coming out of that going. That was my favourite. So I'm going to go Robbie X versus Dijak. I think for spectacle, MJF versus Oku would be one of my favourites from spectacle and what it means. But probably in terms of actual match, Robbie X versus Dijak on that as well. And I think that's all the venues covered.
It's a lot of venues, isn't it, between us? That is a lot of venues.
Yeah. Yeah, we have covered this country.
It's the one kind of... It's the one that got away for me because... so I go town to town now, but I didn't until pretty much last year's Copper Box. Mm-hmm. Last year's Copper Box was like the turning point when I was like, do you know what? I'm going all in. I'm going to go to every show. I don't care.
Yeah.
Whereas before that, I did a lot. I did all the Stevenage, all the St. Neots, all the 229s, all the York Halls. Mm-hmm. But I didn't do Sheffield, Southampton, and Portsmouth. And then by the time I'd embraced Sheffield and Southampton, Portsmouth had stopped running. Yeah. So maybe one day.
Yeah.
Maybe one day I'll get down there. Our next one's it's a big one. This one, mate. So this is from a friend of the channel, Chris Burke from Twitter, who basically asking, with the cruiserweight and heavyweight titles and the fact that generally the wrestlers in Rev Pro blur the lines between cruiserweight and heavyweight anyway. What's the kind of the merit for the 2 belts in 2024? And then what do we think of like kind of the past, the present, and the future of the division?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is an interesting one because this is a conversation I've had a lot with, like, talk about AEW, for instance, right? And I've kind of always said that I understand why cruiserweight titles existed even up to, say, 5-6 years ago, okay? Because you had companies where it had a lot of bigger guys. The UK scene, I'd say guys are generally getting smaller as well. Even though we've never been the biggest nation in terms of size, I've always seen big guys, if it's not in height, in other ways in build. So this is an interesting one because do I think a cruiserweight title is still needed in the sense of a separate division purely because of size? I don't know. But I think the role it plays in Rev Pro is quite an interesting one. That, again, if you're a big company weekly TV, I don't think works quite as well. But with RevPro, it allows you to do two things. One, it gives you that little undercard belt without the pressure of the heavyweight title storyline, right? Cameron Kai is a perfect example of this. He is going for that belt rather than directing all his attention to the world title. Because why does that make sense right now, right? It doesn't. Like, and then you have to build him up to get worthy to that, to then get knocked out, and then right, Cameron Kai's had his shot, right? So this gives another lane for the lower card or mid card to go for and actually make some stories and hold some gold, understand like the relevance of chasing that, being a champion, all of that goes with it. It's giving Will Caven the opportunity to stand out as a champion. And now I think that really helps. But what it also does is it means that you can bring in, again, what I refer to as the banger wrestlers, your Neons, your Mascara Doradas, your Leo Rushes, all of those people. You can bring those guys in who you know that you put them in the ring against anyone, they're going to have a great match, right? And I think that's a market people overlook in terms of casuals, right? And I think RevPro try and balance this really nicely. They try and balance the casual market alongside those guys who are going to buy tickets week in, week out. Because if you're going to a Stevenage show and dads are taking their kids, the kids are going to gravitate to a lot of these wrestlers. They see the guys in the lucha masks, or we saw it with Leo Rush, like how much the kids were into him all weekend, right? Those sorts of people are why I think a cruiserweight belt works really well. But in terms, I think, in terms of actually, do I think as a division cruiserweight is needed in 2024 in any company? Generally, no. But I can see the purpose it shares it. Yeah, and I think if you're
look at like a company like AEW, like if you're saying shoot weights rather than work weights, and you're saying that, you know, whatever you're going to call a junior heavyweight or a cruiserweight, because that blurs the lines as well, right? Like obviously WWE used 205 pounds, hence the 205 live. New Japan use 100 kilograms, which if I remember correct, comes out of like, is that like the old light heavyweight belt in WWE, which was 225 pounds?
That I would say around that, yeah.
Like most of your wrestlers fit underneath that weight. Most of them do.
Yeah.
Up and down the cards, up and down the promotions. Mate, I completely agree with you in absolutely everything you just said. I think of the cruiserweight title as being like the old Intercontinental title in WWF, like, and I'm being specific with WWF rather than WWE.
Yeah.
Because that's like when it was held by like your work rate guy, who was basically getting a run with the title to see if they had the stones to carry the real title in a year or 2 years' time. And I feel like that's what Michael Oku did. I feel like that's when I came into RevPro with him as Cruiserweight champion, and obviously I've gone back and watched everything else, and it always felt like this brilliant, like, you can headline a 229 with a Cruiserweight belt, you can headline the cockpit with a Cruiserweight belt, you can headline anywhere with it. I mean, when you think about, like, you know, the Cruiserweight title, I literally listened to the A Squared podcast today, and it was an episode where they were talking about Epic Encounter 2019. And it was the Cruiserweight title headlined that show. It was El Phantasmo versus Michael Oku in a ladder match.
Yeah.
That for me is where the Cruiserweight title fits in. Yeah. And the alternative is, if it wasn't a Cruiserweight title and it was a mid-card title, you can't have a television champion. They're not on TV. Like things like I've never liked Intercontinental Championship and European Championship and Global Championship, because it's like, what does that mean? Like, you tell me what the difference between, in New Japan, what's the difference between the Global Champion and the World Champion? Like, yeah, Global and World
it's the same.
But it's exactly the same. So you want something to be able to separate the title from the other title, and maybe the best way to do it in the UK is just by having a weight class, because you can absolutely work it, especially given that in Rev Pro it is canon that you can challenge above your weight. So Michael Oku is a cruiserweight wrestler in size, but he held the heavyweight championship because he punched above his weight.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's absolute. And, you know, you then have the cool storyline with Charles Samuels trying to work down his weight.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, I'm all for it. I think that for me, the future of it, how we get it back to its prominence is getting somebody to be able to have the run that Robbie X had with it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel like any, I don't even, and I hate to say it, even Mills's cruiserweight title run, I don't think had the prominence, the longevity, the importance that Robbie's had.
Mm-hmm.
It always felt like, you know, you're always going to see Robbie X on the card, and obviously he was a babyface champion, so you're going to see him defending it regularly. That's kind of part of the dynamic. But I feel like I always felt like Mills's reign had way more legs in it, and they decided to end it earlier than I would have had it been me. And again, we'll always caveat that by the fact that I've never run a wrestling company, and Andy Gordon has done it successfully for 12 years. But, you know, if it were me, I feel like it could have carried on longer. And obviously I'm sure there was lots of other factors that played into the decision to storylines that he wanted to run, that he needed Mills not to have the belt for, or, you know, opportunity to crown Leon Slater at a time when he was really hot and get eyes on RevPro that way. So I feel like it just needs a champion to run with the belt and have the reign that's going to make it feel special again. And I'm not entirely sure if that's something that they can design or if it's something that will just organically happen.
Yeah.
Because I feel like Caven could be the one to have that reign, because it could be. I think his reign started really well. I really want to say that. His match with Cameron Klein at 229 was wicked. His match at Global Wars, the fact that those two boys came out and opened that show in front of all those people with, you know, like literally every single match at Global Wars had a Tanahashi in it. Or it had like the absolute cream of the crop in British wrestlers with like Oku and RKJ. And it was opened by Will Caven versus Cameron Klein. Two guys who were very much on the infancy of their careers in terms of performing in front of that many people with that much like scrutiny and kind of like, so many eyes on it for good and for bad, you know, because when there's a new market and a new town, there's going to be people judging it. You're not wrestling in front of a safe Rev Pro crowd. You're wrestling in front of a new crowd. Who knows what it's going to be like? They smashed it out of the park. So Caven could absolutely be the one to have this amazing run. And if he's not, then I'm not sure who is at this point. But like I say, I'm not sure if it's something they'll design or if it's something that they'll, you know, it will happen organically. I think that kind of covers everything.
I think so. And now looking at the time, Dave, we are almost at 8:30. So we've got 4 more questions to do. So
I left these ones till last because I think they're all quite quick fire.
So do I. But I think this one follows on nicely from what you've just said. Will Conor Mills be undisputed British heavyweight champion?
Yes, I think he will.
Yeah.
So Mikey James from Instagram asked me this one, and he added on to the bottom of it. He said, "Yes, I do too, but I think he will." I think Mills will. I feel like the championship is in very safe hands between Mills, Jacobs, Oku, and RKJ. And, you know, wrestling's wrestling. Oku could be signed to AEW by Christmas and we never see him again. That's a possibility. RKJ could break his neck tomorrow and never wrestle again. You know, like these things happen, right?
Yeah.
We're touching wood that doesn't happen. We love you, mate. But, you know, like stuff like this can happen. But that's why you don't put all your eggs in one basket. And they've built 4 top-level guys here. I feel like at the moment, Mills is bottom of the 4. But of course he is, because the other 3 have all held the title on Mills. It's only a matter of time before he does so.
Yeah.
And then, you know, JJ Gowell would hear that and be like, put my name in that. Because I want to, you know, I'm there too. And Josiah and Robbie X, like these guys could all get there too. or are on their way to getting there too. But in story and canon, those 4 are like the cream of the crop.
Yeah,
so
agreed.
Yeah, I think it will happen. I've put my money on it.
Yeah, I would too. I think he's far too talented, had matches with far too many prominent people to not get there.
Yeah. Next one from Ewan McKenzie on Instagram, who says, and I love the fact that he's caveated this by saying you're not allowed to say Zazaya, because everybody would say Zazaya.
Cheat
Who's
code.
your favourite discovery via Rev Pro this year?
I am still going to cheat slightly. It's not someone that I've entirely discovered this year because of Rev Pro. Actually, if I'm going to go with the person that I've discovered, I've never seen before and first seen in Rev Pro, it's probably Debbie Keitel. I think she's great. I would like to see more. The one that I'm going to use as my answer for this, though, even though I knew of her beforehand, is Kanji. I feel that Kanji has been awoken, my eyes have been focused a bit more on what Kanji does and gone like, okay, I'm fully like out there. So while I've obviously known of Kanji beforehand, it has been a discovery to actually just spend some time watching a bit more closely, that analytical eye, rather than just be like, oh cool, this was a fun match, and actually spend time on it.
Yeah, I like that. I'm going to go with people who I'd never seen wrestle before this year and might well still have never seen wrestle had it not been for Rev Pro.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it's any one of 3 in Jay Joshua, Mike DeVecchio, and one called Manders. I don't see a lot of American independent wrestling, so Manders is not someone who I might have just stumbled across. Mike DeVecchio I'd been suggested to check out his matches from my good friends at the Tea and Tights podcast. And Jay Joshua is someone that had always been, friends who go and watch the Welsh scene have been like, watch out for Jay Joshua, he's going to come to Rev Pro at some point, it's inevitable. So it's getting to see those 3 live and getting to see them like a couple of times or more each has been like absolutely lovely. If I was going to pick one, I'm going to go Manders because I'm rocking his shirt right now and absolutely love the fella.
Yeah, you know what? I purposely left him out as well because I was like, is that going to be the Mark answer because we had him on the podcast, which still blows my mind that we have. But he
first ever guest.
Yeah, first ever guest, and what a brilliant guest he was. But what brilliant matches he put on. So some great points there. Dave, the next question was from Andrew39 on Instagram, who I can only imagine is an Andy Quilden burner account, right? Wants to know what is our favourite Rev Pro match of the year, and again has caveated this, other than Ospreay versus Oku.
Yeah, I like that. So I'm, you know me, right? And anyone that listens to this regularly knows I'm a massive overthinker. So I've made myself not overthink this and just go with the first match I thought of. And my first match I thought of was Oku versus Jacobs as the main event of the Copper Box. There was so much riding on that match. It was such a bold decision to put 2 British wrestlers in the main event. I don't know if we told this story on this podcast or not before, but a few days before the Copper Box, George and I were in Cardiff to watch AEW. We bumped into Don Callis. He was lost and couldn't find the venue, and we just tried to give him directions, but he still seemed a little bit unsure. So we were like, it's just around the corner. Like, do you want us to walk you? So we did. We walked him, and we were just trying to play it cool and not be like absolute marks. We didn't ask him for a photo or anything. We didn't try and we just chatted to him. But I was wearing my Rev Pro shirt. And he was like, oh, you're a Rev Pro fan. And he was asking about Rev Pro. And we were talking to him about the Copper Box. And he said, so what's the main event of that their big show, is it? And I said, oh, it's Michael Oku versus Luke Jacobs. And he just reacted with like, I don't know this person. He was like, is Gabe Kidd on that card? I was like, yeah, Gabe's there. And then I name dropped like ELP and people like that and Dante Martin. And he was like, oh, all right, yeah, cool. But the fact is, when I said it was Oku versus Luke Jacobs, he was like, I don't know who they are. Mm-hmm. But if he had gone to watch that show, and I do love, I love the idea that he might have been there to check it out, because he said that you know, I hope that lots of people that were there for All In Weekend from AEW went to watch Rev Pro.
Same.
He'd leave knowing who those lads were, because
Yeah.
that was a main event worthy of main event in a show like that, and it was everything that an Ospreay main event would be, and that's like the highest praise I can pay anyone, because like Ospreay's the best wrestler in the world, and we've been spoiled by seeing so many Ospreay main events, but Oku and Jacobs was as good as any of them.
Yeah.
What about you, my brother?
So interesting, because I've not gone back and watched anything from this second half of the year. So I've watched it all live, and I've not gone back to watch anything yet. So my mind is very much in first half of the year mode. So it'll be interesting to see how this turns out when we do our end of year shows. I've gone back and actually watched some of these matches. So I imagine that match will probably be my second. But in terms of actual here and now matches that I remember and just provide a different flavour, both involve the current IWGP champion, and one would be against Connor Mills, and the other would be against Hechicero. I put them both in this package because I think they are both bookends of just one great wrestler and the style that he has against two very different types of opponents, and how that just come across really well. So those would be, that would be.
And our very last question of the evening.
Sorry, we're just having some technical difficulties.
Sorry, bud, if I talked over you. You disappeared for a second.
You are absolutely fine.
Sound had gone, but actually,
no,
I think it was.
Dave, you know what? I'm not.
You disappeared.
I'm not.
Tech gremlin right at the end.
A tech gremlin right at the end. So you know what? This isn't getting cut out. This is staying in. The people are going to see the things that we come up against. But the reason I'm leaving it in is because your camera froze, and what it did is it froze. Where you were like. It was the most unflattering photo I think I've ever seen of you. So that is entirely...
It doesn't surprise me at all.
That is entirely staying in there, my brother.
This is not a face for still photos. This is a voice for radio, not a face for the photos. Our very last question, and I put this one in last because what an opportunity to remind everybody that Uprising tickets went on sale this week for general sale. And I hope that lots and lots and lots of people are going to join me at York Hall on the 21st of December for Michael Oku versus Luke Jacobs, part 5 of their story. And Karen Cadman on Instagram asked where our favourite place to sit in York Hall is, which is so perfect because I was looking at the seating map this week, buying my ticket, trying to decide where I wanted to sit based on that.
So where we picked?
You've only been to York Hall the once, right?
I've been once, mate. So I can only judge by where I've sat, which was I was literally front row, centre front row, like could not have been by the bar. So I loved that. I thought it was a really great seat. However, I do like the look of that balcony above.
Yeah, so I've taken in most places at York Hall to be there. I've sat like front row, centre of the hard cam, like best possible seats in the sense that no one's ever standing in your way because you're constantly on camera. Love sitting there. It's the perfect view, but comes at a high premium in terms of like it's the most expensive seat. Of course it is. I've also done the I can't remember what they're called, but they're like the side blocks, I think they're called. So basically you've got the ring and then you've got the front rows around it. But the corners where you're still technically front row, they come at a much more discounted price because you do have a slightly interrupted view because you've got the ring post.
Yeah.
They're great value, like really, really good value. I've stood. So I've bought a cheaper ticket and then just gone and stood at the side and watched it from there. And I remember at the time, like checking in with Andy on Twitter, just being like, "Are you allowed to do that?" And he was like, "Yeah, like it's absolutely fine as long as if the steward feels the need to ask you to return you to your seat, you do." But nobody ever did, and I've never seen them do that. So like, that was cool. fit in I think probably the best value, if you are someone that likes taking photos, one of the best value seats is if you get a ticket. They go quite quickly, so they might have already gone. But getting a ticket on the ramp, the first seat next to the ramp. It doesn't have to be front row, second row, third row. You can be like 10 rows back. But if you're on the side of the ramp, you've got, as you turn, you've got the wrestler's entrance. So you've got perfect photos there. You've got the interactions with the wrestlers as they go past both times. And even if you're a shorter person and you've got a big lump like me sitting in front of you, you can very easily just sort of like lean slightly to either side, and you've got this perfect view.
Nice.
They're wicked. But having said all of that, I bought a balcony ticket, an unallocated balcony ticket for Uprising, because I did that for Fantastic Mania. I just wanted to save a few quid. So I bought an unallocated balcony ticket, realised that it's not like a free-for-all when you get up there. There's loads of good seats. Just,
yeah,
you know, as long as you do a little bit of a queue, or you'll get a cracking seat. And then you've got this completely uninterrupted view. You've got no ropes. You are above it. You're looking down on it. And I think that's me now. I think that's where I'll sit at all your cool shows. Yeah, I love the atmosphere up there. I love being a noisy bastard. So I love like that side of it. And I got cracking photos and got to enjoy every second of it. So yeah, I think that's me for your call.
Nice, love it. And I think next time I go to York Hall by myself, that's probably where I'm going to go, see what it's like up there. Because there's a few shows like Fantastic Mania as well. I love the idea of it, but it's never going to be something that will grab me for like a premium price ticket. So it seems perfect for me to just go and sit up there and go, hey, we've got a morning show of wrestling with some great wrestlers here. Let's just go and watch that. So, you know what, Dave, that is a perfect place to end it. So everyone, thank you again for all of your questions. Really humbling to get the amount of questions that we've got. Anyone that wants to get in touch at any point and just give us a question and say, hey, can you read this out on the podcast sometime? If we can make it work, we will. But as Dave said, we will be back later on this year at some point. I say later on this year as we are creeping into November in a couple of days' time. But we will obviously
Christmas list before you know it, brother.
We will be doing Christmas lists, and we will be doing all of that good stuff on this channel as well. So keep on subscribing, keep on sharing the words. We are at 69 followers, subscribers on YouTube. We would like to do as much as we can to get that as close to 100. I think what Dave and I, when we spoke about this at the beginning of the year, we said around 70 felt like a good place to be. Because 50 is like you're halfway to 100, then you got 100, so 70 just sits almost nicely in the middle there, and we are one away from that. So help us get there. It's not lost on me, like these past 22 episodes, how people are getting involved, and again, the DM conversations that I'm having with certain people about appearing. We haven't been able to finalise things yet, and I know I keep dropping little nuggets in there, but we are working on dates. We're trying to do these things, but it's only made possible by you people who watch it, who give us the drive to carry on doing this each week. So just thank you to everyone, and thank you to my wonderful co-host, Mr. Dave Lamarck. Have a great evening, my friend. Take care. Bye-bye.
Cheers, guys. Bye-bye.